James Mirtle of The Athletic joins me now. What's up, brother? How we doing?
Good.
Yeah. So, I was thinking about this on the way in today. So you would agree with me that the two biggest positives of the season so far have been Stolarz and Nyes, yes?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Okay.
Yep, and I guess maybe what's happening on the blue line too.
Okay, so that I was going to ask you what your third is, and that's where you would take it. Because I was going to say, what would be the third to you?
Tanev, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's not a surprise. Or even Ekman Larson, I guess.
It's not a surprise. I don't know if those other two guys are surprises either. Like, Nyes being good was not a surprise to many people. And I think
how good though, like how good he is I mean, he's taken even more of a step. He's on pace for 40 goals, JD.
Yeah. Hey, check my text receipts.
You said he was going to get 40 goals?
I think I said that he could get 35.
Yeah.
Yeah, go look it up.
Sure looks like it.
Go take a little peekaroo. The kid was very much into the Matthew Nyes stock. Bought it early. I'm genuinely one of those people that bought Bitcoin when it was worthless. And you're one of those guys that sold it for a slice of pizza. So it's all right.
Never had any.
Yeah, never had any. Anyways, okay, so this is the other part of it, okay? So it's a positive night for the Leafs. It's an encouraging night for the Leafs. But it's also a weird night for the Leafs because they do it without Matthews. And normally you just go, yeah, whatever, who cares? Teams miss their best players and they can still win hockey games. No one thinks that they were impossible to do it. But like it is a trend now, man. The Leafs without Matthews in the regular season now are 36, 19-2. So that's 65% getting point. Like that's like, again, this is a good team that gets something close to that when they have them. So I'll give it that caveat. Goals per game, 3.25. And the power play percentage is 30% in that span when they don't have them. I do not subscribe to the idea that this team is better without Auston Matthews. I don't think anybody does. But do you have any theories or thoughts as to why this trend has emerged? Because to me, this is now enough of a sample to warrant talking about it.
So the only thing I can think of that it might be is the other guys around the room look around and like, okay, we can't mess around tonight. You know, with the big guys not here, there's going to be more opportunity for some other players. And those letdown games that the Leafs have had so often in this era with this core where they go in on a Tuesday night against Columbus just to randomly pick a pot and they lay an egg.
Yep.
Without Matthews there, I'm sure it's we need to be on. We can't mail it in and just expect that our stars are gonna, if we go down by 2 goals, that we're gonna be able to come back, because that might not be the case without him. That's the only thing I can think of that makes sense.
The crazy part about that though is that the lineup is not a balanced, deep lineup full of guys that would be taking nights off. It's always been a lineup of guys who are, I don't want to say barely in the NHL, but not centerpieces to this roster, right?
But I think even the other stars, though, it feels like they're the ones that really elevate when Matthews isn't there. And you look at how many minutes Nylander played and how well he played in that game, and Riley steps up, and I don't think necessarily it's like the David Camps that are carrying them when Matthews is out of the lineup.
Yeah, just picture him in the dressing. All right, guys, it's time to get serious now. Like David,
well, he played like 16 minutes or something, 7 minutes on the PK.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. That
was his best game of the year last night.
Yeah, no, and the penalty kill was really solid. To me, the only actual take I have from it in terms of what Matthews' absence has meant to me that is tangible is it really was another example to me anyways of, can you not just try to split Matthews and Marner again? Like, I know we've done this before, but Marner looked just fine driving a line last night. And in fact, there were moments where I thought to myself, and again, maybe it's always so hard to be like, what was I thinking about Marner's game against like the Columbus on a Tuesday, right? Or what was I thinking about his game? And I've actually I think that line has been really good this year. Matthews is obviously not scoring at 5-on-5 at the same rate that he has in seasons prior, even though I actually think that his numbers in general are like pretty much where they were a season ago. So I don't believe in the panicking of Matthews. This has nothing to do with taking away from a certain player, believing that those guys don't work together. I just think that there's a lot of intrigue about what you could see with working them apart. And the idea that, Marner needs to play with Matthews because it's a waste to have someone with his playmaking ability, not with a goal scorer of Matthews' caliber, that is just an immediate disqualifier for trying to spread those lines out.
Yeah, actually, I was playing with this last night, so I like the Nyes-Matthews combination. So is there a world where you could do something like Nyes, Matthews, and Domi or something? I don't know. Like, I wonder what.
Then you're too thin, in my opinion, on what Marner is actually playing with.
Nylander, he's gonna have to be with Nylander.
Well, yeah,
some
that's
configuration.
It. Yeah, like but then you're back to the 2-line thing. You know what I'm saying? The goal of this season has to be that at some point you try to look at, in a meaningful way, what the talent looks like spread across 3 lines. That's always been what people want to see. And please just try and answer it. Even if it doesn't turn out to be something that works, you always have the ability to go back to the top 6 where it's completely loaded up. We just need to see at some point them split. And I do want to see what it looks like with Marner and somebody else. To me, I would actually say, even though Domi looked great playing with Matthews, that the more sensible thing to do is actually have the 2 London Knight guys work together and have a bit of an undersized line and see what those 2 can do, and then keep Nyes with Matthews and then fire somebody else up there.
The weird thing with Domi and Marner together is that Marner is one of the best defensive forwards in the league, and Domi might be one of the worst. So, how do you use that line? You know, they were getting, some more difficult defensive work last night. I don't know if you want to do that, against the best teams in the league, which I think we can all say Boston is no longer one of them right now.
Mm-hmm. That, to me, it's just you're making, or you're solving. I shouldn't say solving. This is strong. I'm looking for a different word there. But you're trying to figure out if you can make something work for both guys. One being Marner stays with another talented player. And it does feel like his line, where you are empowering him and saying, this is your group, you're responsible for them. But 2 is that you're giving Domi the chance to play with a good player, because it just, to me, that is one thing that I'm sure of, is that if you're going to put Max Domi with not high-end talent, you're not going to be getting the most out of Max Domi, and he's not going to be elevating another 3rd line that all of a sudden the other dudes are going to start looking amazing.
Yeah. So we'll play it out then. So is it Nylander up with Matthews then and Nyes, and then Tavares is the 3rd-line center, and Domi and Marner and, I don't know, McMahon or something? Is that the way it would play out?
I think that you would try Matthews. I hate saying this because I used to always mock Mike Babcock for trying this stuff, because in our Leafs
Connor
group
Brown
chat, and Hyman, and we chop it into a square, chop the puck into a square, just beat it into a square, and Matthews is out there. But I think I would go back to some kind of configuration like that, give him a shot to play with a guy like a McMahon, and if you feel like he's in over his head, then put Pacioretty there. Try, maybe McMahon with that line, and then balance it out so that you've got something to do with a Domi Nylander or a Domi Marner group. And even do we need to see Marner Tavares? Maybe you take a look at it as well. I'm not opposed to it, but I want to see them all spread out, and I want to see what Mitch Marner can do, where it's just his line and it's not anchored to one of those 2 same centermen that we've seen over and over again.
Well, they need another center, right?
Yeah, of course.
We're going to be talking. Yeah, that's what's going to happen over and over again. If they had another, $5-6 million center, then it'd be easy to spread them all out, and it would make a lot of sense. And you'd barely have to play your 4th line, and you'd look pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing is you can't do that now. So what do you do? You put a placeholder in there, somebody else, to at least look at it and say, okay, no, this is what makes it even more clear, right? This is what makes it even more obvious that you need that player, because you're not doing that today. You're not doing that for months.
Yeah, but the problem is your placeholders are going to they're going to ruin the concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can put Pontus Holmberg in there with good players. It seems like a waste.
Yeah.
Unless you I don't know. I don't know what you do. It's an interesting thought experiment, though.
I don't think it's a waste. It's just they get back to the 2 problems. One is that somebody's always going to be playing with, the inferior center if you split the 2 wingers off of their lines, where it's just, the problem is trying to find that guy. But then the main one to me that I always come back to is how you divide the minutes.
Yeah.
And you can load up lines and you can try to get creative with it, which we've seen Keefe do in the past, which we've seen Berube do already this season. But ultimately, it's going to be really difficult in a season where Nylander's already pointed to his ice time and Mitch Marner's in a contract year, and there's just never a justification for not playing Matthews 20 minutes a night. that you could find a way to look at it and at the end of each game go, oh, the lines were good. I think it would be a good thing for those players to sacrifice for the rest of the roster and all of them end up taking a little bit less of a load, that if they all ended up closer to the number, it would be great. Or you could kind of roll with who's going or adjust as the game is going on to make sure guys get more ice time. Roll certain guys with the fourth line, something Versteeg pointed out. And again, something they did with Nylander the other night. Like, it's not impossible, but it does make things trickier for the coaching staff. And I don't know if they want to absorb that responsibility this early in the season. Yeah.
It's easy to say, but then they're scuffling and they lose a bunch of games, and then you're the coach, and you're like, you still got to make the playoffs, right? Like so.
You think that's in jeopardy at all, though?
Well, the last I looked, they were at like an 89% chance or something like that. So it's not impossible. It's just, what did they lost 5 of 7, I think, coming into the game against Boston. Like, if they would have lost last night, this show would have been a lot more concernometer than it is right now. So you beat a bad Boston team that's played terribly early this season, and I don't think it absolves everything that happened on the weekend and some of the other bad games that they've played. So they do have to balance being competitive this year with pulling out all kinds of experiments and trying different things with the lineup.
Yeah, I do think that there's going to be a team in the Atlantic that gets hot, right? Like, there's going to be a stretch of the year where one of these groups, not the Leafs, like the Leafs will have their moment for sure, but I'm talking about the other ones, where it's going to be a Lightning or a Boston or an Ottawa. I think that those are kind of the suspects. I'm really down on Detroit. I don't care.
No.
Like, I don't
look at that blue line.
And I don't think that's happening. And I'm done with the Sabres in terms of believing that this is like going to turn around in some meaningful way. And the Habs aren't there yet. So I think that is one of the advantages for Leafs. We've always talked about, hey, the regular season is important. Try to go out and win your division. You're kind of balancing those two things where this feels like the most winnable the division has ever been, right? Like,
in a long time. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Even Florida, like Bobrovsky's, I think he's got like an 890 save percentage or something like that, and they've just been finding a ways to score a lot of goals. Yeah. I don't think you look at where the Leafs are, like they're right there with Tampa. Like, it's, so yeah. No, I think going on a run, I think for sure the Atlantic's available.
Yeah, the Atlantic's available, but also the second part of that was going to be, it's also really not that threatening to me in terms of if you do have not such an impressive regular season in the standings, I just have a hard time believing that like 3 of those teams are going to all leapfrog the Maple Leafs. When you're talking about you still have to make the playoffs. Like, the world where that Boston team, the Ottawa Senators, and the Tampa Bay Lightning all jump the Leafs this season is just, it seems beyond implausible to me. It feels just like this is something that's now going to get clipped and put into when the Leafs go have the new 18-wheeler that goes off the cliff. This will be the lead of that clip. But
I'm saying is, yeah, when they're losing as many games as they have the last 10 days or whatever, I can see why the coaching staff isn't pulling out the wacky line combinations and moving everything all around. Yeah. So
I would argue that's the time to do it. Although this is, I think that this is kind of what happens though. But this is exactly what inspired it last season, right? Is Marner was the guy that was missing from the lineup, and granted, it was for a longer stretch, right? So they actually had to play those guys together. But that is how Domi emerged. That's how Domi got the contract extension. If we would have had Max Domi down on the third line for the entire season, like this version of Max Domi, right? Does he get that contract extension? Like, no. That's exactly it. And so I don't understand the thought process behind, okay, so Domi looked good playing with Matthews. He looked good with extended minutes and with better line mates. And it felt like he was a real part of this team and a real part of this core. Great, let's extend him. And you go, for how much? And you say, for a meaningful chunk of change. And they say, oh, right on. And then you go into the year and he gets a little blip of that. And then, 2 weeks in, they say, hey, you're actually back down to the third line and you're going to be the pivot here, something that didn't work out. And we're back to Groundhog Day of, oh, wait, has this guy scored yet? No, he has not. Has he had a bunch of meaningful offensive plays? A handful, but not anything incredible. God, you wish he would have got one yesterday for the story, because that would have been just like they hit for the cycle on everything had he actually scored a goal. But yeah, I don't understand the idea of paying him that money, that contract, when it was based off of what we saw and the reason why we saw it, and then putting him in that role. And that ultimately, what they did get yesterday is you get the benefit of, if you can stay hot, if this can continue to work, if Marner can continue to play this way, you get to say, hey, we don't want to change this lineup. And so Matthews needs to kind of enter it, and we fit him back in.
So he picks up Camp's extra minutes, or you
Sure.
give him the 7 minutes on the PK.
You're given. Well, first of all, he is getting PK minutes. Like, he's on both special teams. He's definitely stepping into power play one again. Like, I'm not worried about Matthews' minutes. Like, he's going to play, and I'm not worried so much about Marner's minutes. It's actually more what would end up happening to the Nylander minutes, where you go, okay, you can't let this be a story. You can't have the second time where the report comes out that Nylander's upset about the ice time. That's where I start to go, ooh, then this is more than him talking to a new coach to try to prove himself or to make sure that he's staying in the mix. This is now something that he's probably upset about.
You're totally right about Domi, though. He's wasted at 3.75 as a third-line center. Like, he's just not going to – that line gives you nothing. He can't play with Robertson and McMahon and be anything that makes sense at that number. I mean, you might as well be giving more minutes to Holmberg and Camp and Lawrence and these guys. So finding a way to move him up. The only thing, like, his defensive limitations are the line that you put him on in the top six has to be one that you're not putting in your own zone, that you're not playing against other teams' top lines. So you got to factor in those limitations as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that's less of a concern to me, to be honest, because I never really felt that last year when he was playing with Matthews. Like, I just didn't. I don't remember feeling like, oh my God, Domi, another horrible defensive lap. Oh my God, Domi, just completely unplayable. I think it's like when he's on the wing and he plays with great players, you get a lot out of him, and he's fine. It's not a huge liability. And the thought of just being afraid to try something because it's like, you can't do that. Like, you just have to be a little bit more aggressive than it. You've seen more positive out of Domi when he's been up the lineup with good players than you have when he's down the lineup. And the idea that, well, he's too much of a liability to get extra ice time on the wing, but he's less of a liability playing down the middle with lesser competition, but also an important role, like, that dog doesn't hunt for me. So I think, again, this is clear. You got to figure out how to balance your lines. That does involve somebody else being the pivot of the third line, because you don't want Domi there. And if he is the pivot of the third line, then it has to be with one of those better wingers that is more, or that can be more defensively responsible, or can be essentially the driver of the line. Anyways, okay. So and last thing on the Matthews thing, the injury is what? He misses the next 2 games. That's it.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Like,
for sure one of the next 2, but my guess is probably the next 2. I mean, I don't know how many games he's been playing with it, but it sounds like it's been a little while, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, his shooting percentage is half of what it normally is, and he just hasn't popped. You guys have been talking about it on the post-game shows a lot. Like, he just hasn't been as dynamic as he's been in other years, and there's been chances, but and I wonder, with the power play looking the way it has, how much of that is that Matthews is just not where he needs to be. And I don't know if it'll come out or not what the injury is, but they're saying it's not the wrist. So is that, I don't know, is it his back again or something like that? It's got to be something that's impacting shooting mechanics, would be my guess.
I mean, that's kind of a fun game. All right, it's not his wrist. It's like Guess Who, but for a body injury where they're like, it's upper body. Is it upper body? You're like, yes, okay, it's upper body. Is it his wrist? No, it's not his wrist. Well, it wouldn't be his head because there would have been something different. So it's below the head and not the wrist. So it's like, okay, cool. It's his back, it's his sternum, it's his chest, it's his hand. Like, whatever. I don't particularly care. I mean, I do care what it is. The only thing that I really care about is that it's not something that's going to linger, because, again, to me, you play this as cautiously as you possibly can with him.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. Yeah. So, it makes sense. And with the way the schedule is with the back-to-backs, it's going to be basically a week-long break for him, and then you see where he's at then. Okay,
so speaking of workloads and being overly cautious, it's like when Woll came back, the reporting on the situation was very much, hey, they've got their plan. They're going to be sticking to this plan. They don't want to overexert Anthony Stolarz, and it made sense. And to a degree, it still does make sense. But at this point, the one guy is just, he's outperforming the other in a pretty significant way. And if you want to tell me that they are making this push to try to actually win the division, and they are trying to be a team that is different. And, just even going across the league, like when you look at one red hot goalie this way, they usually end up getting more games. Do you ever read at all on the Leafs' plan here and whether this is something that is a little bit more adjustable now that we're getting a growing sample of what Stolarz is?
I think the thing they're weighing is just that Stolarz hasn't played 50 plus games in a season. I was going to say ever. I don't, maybe once in the minors in his career. Like he's just hasn't done it. So I think you want to be a little bit careful. I think making him the 1A and Woll's the 1B is fine. I just don't know if you want to go to where, would you feel okay giving him over 50 starts? The thing you don't want to do is wear him down in time for when the games really matter.
I'm not as pearl clutchy about that as I thought I would be. I don't think that he's going to have such an immense workload that I'm going to be beyond concerned about it. I think Woll is still going to get his opportunities. It's going to be more than back-to-backs. I don't think that anyone's insinuating that the only time this guy plays is on the second half of a back-to-back. This isn't going to I mentioned this before, but this isn't going to the Michael Hutchinson times, right? Where you're only playing the guy out of desperation. He's clearly going to get his spots. And I think that they're going to be more when the schedule is labor intensive, where they have the 3 and 5 kind of nights, right? Where it's okay, we're going to give you a blow here, and we're going to obviously give Woll the second half of back-to-backs, or maybe sometimes the front end of a back-to-back. I don't know, that they get creative that way. That he's not going to play close to 60, but that 50 is certainly not an unreasonable number to me, especially considering that the goal if they were doing it 50-50 was 41. I think if he adds 10 more starts, it's fine.
Yeah, I think 50 should be the ceiling now. You don't want to go higher than that. So,
but why? Just because he hasn't?
You don't. Yeah, because he hasn't. He's had lots of injuries. He's a huge guy. He hasn't done it before, and the games that really matter for you are in April. Yeah. So you don't want to do who do we want to use an example? You don't want to do the Giordano where you play him a ton in January and then he's completely useless in April.
Yeah. But again, Giordano was 40 years old.
Well, use another example.
But that's actually my point is when we do this kind of stuff, right? When you say hey, be careful of the workload. I think about the NFL right now. Derrick Henry is rushing the ball a lot for the Baltimore Ravens and they've been sort of able to dial back his workload a little because they've had blowouts and the passing attack has been so prolific. But ultimately, this is a running back that's got a lot of miles on the tires, who's extremely integral to what their team is doing, and who's over 30. And we have a lot of data to suggest that a running back over 30 is he's not the same guy, and that you do need to be more cautious with the workload. And no one has really presented to me a meaningful case with goaltenders of, guys of this age or guys of this when they play this games or when they go over and they increase the workload by this amount that there's a significant drop off in this case. I just need some more of that from people before I start going, we got to dial back the minutes. I understand the general thesis of it, the general idea of it, and it does make sense to me, right? I'm not advocating for this guy to be getting, Ed Belfour's old schedule where they go, or even the more modern one is Vasilevsky, where they're dragging him out of the net every single night. But yeah, I'm not gonna make one of my stories of the year or one of my biggest concerns of the year the idea that this guy ends up playing 56 games.
Yeah, it's the same thing we talked about earlier. If you feel confident you're going to make the playoffs, then what's the point in leaning on him so heavily? And you want to have the successful teams. A lot of them have two goalies going, and you want to get Woll going. So you're going to have to give him some opportunity. I mean, that having that injury and missing the start of the season is really tough. Look at the way that Jeremy Swayman has started the season, missing training camp and everything. It's really tough for a goalie. And the other thing I would say is that I don't have any data or whatever on starting goalies and that, but the league has moved to more of a tandem system, and especially the bigger guys seem to break down when they play more games. It happened with Freddie Anderson. It happened with Robin Lehner. I remember Ben Bishop ran into all kinds of injury problems. Stolarz is huge. He's 6'7", 246 or something. He's one of the biggest goalies in league history. And it's a big man to be putting in the crease and putting that load on his joints all the time. And I would just be careful because you don't want that guy popping a groin or hurting his knee again or something like that. And for what? Just so he plays an extra 7 games this year?
Yeah. So to me, the actual pitch is the part you mentioned with Woll, is that you want to keep him engaged. You want to make him still feel like he's a meaningful part of the team. You want him to just be beyond staying ready for a chance, but someone who's like, getting to feel the puck, getting in there with, more regularity. And he doesn't just end up being ice cold and a backup goaltender. Like, you actually still need to see more from him as well. And if you're talking about which goaltender has the higher ceiling, if you said that's still Woll today, I'm not laughing you out of the room. Like, that's where we were at in the offseason. There's a reason why he got more money than Stolarz did, despite being an RFA than a UFA.
Is the reason that it's a regrettable contract because they would not sign that contract today. So, no. I mean, we'll see. He's young and everything like that, but I think they committed a little bit early on that, especially with the injury to start the year. So, but given that the organization believed in him so much, gave him the 3-year deal, he's going to be part of what they're doing going forward. You got to play him, and I think the best case scenario for the Leafs is you end up in an Allmark Swayman situation of last year where you can go back and forth. You feel good about both guys. They're both putting up a 9-15 plus every night. And that's going to be a big contributor to you winning the division more than just leaning super heavily on Stolarz.
Yeah, he's not a disaster either. This hasn't been a Samsonov situation, right? Where you're like, you can't play this guy, you got to play the other guy. So that's probably a feather in his cap too. It's like, hey, you're playing well. It's just that the other guy's been phenomenal. He's genuinely. I would say for me anyways, like I said, the 2 biggest positives are he and Nyes, but to me the most exciting piece of this season has been the play of Stolarz, because he genuinely. It's not even just how great he's playing. It's the wins above replacement that you're getting on the contract, which brings me to my last thing on Stolarz. No one thought Anthony Stolarz was going to get paid a massive contract, but the goaltending market was pretty thin this past offseason, and looking at it now, does seem like a bit of a miss for a lot of teams to let the Leafs get him on this contract, especially that they got the second year.
Yeah, he got a little bit less than I thought he would. Yeah. I mean, Brossoit got more from Chicago. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was just over $3 million, I think. I mean, look at Kevin Lankinen in Vancouver. He's been fantastic too. I mean, I think Stolarz and Lankinen have been the two of the biggest goalie stories, and Lankinen doesn't sign until almost the season's about to start, and he only gets under $900,000. So goalie's one of those ones where you talk to executives around the league, and they're like, we just don't know. Like the part of the reason the goalies aren't getting paid right now is the GMs just aren't sure about what they're actually worth. So a guy like Stolarz is, and you look at I think the last 3 years he's number 1 in goals saved above expected per game in the league, and then still teams are like, we don't know about this guy, and he's 30 years old. He's been around a long time, and executives still aren't sure about him, and that just shows how unpredictable the position is.
I agree. It's unpredictable. I understand that it's a hard thing to pin down, but I have noticed here anyways in recent vintage, when we're talking about certain guys working out versus certain guys who haven't, that's like a guy with that pedigree who had those metrics, who has this size, who was just on a winning team in a thin market. It would just lead me to believe that somebody would have been more. What did he get? 2.4 over 2? Or sorry, like 2.4 per, 2.5 per over 2 years. So it's like a $5 million deal. That just, I'm sorry, if I was an owner of a team and I was sitting at our team's not doing well, we're not doing well in net, and we weren't extremely deep there to start the year. Like, it's a different story if you're Florida, right? And you like, how do we let this guy go? You go, because we have tons of money invested in the one guy, and we're trying to keep a Stanley Cup core contender. You're like, yeah, okay, fine. If you're the Tampa Bay Lightning and you have Vasilevsky, same kind of thing, Shesterkin, those areas, you go, fine. It's the other teams where they are trying to figure out that split, or they are trying to figure out the other guy, where I look at this and go, how is this just not worth the lottery ticket of trying to push this number up to 3?
Yeah, and then you look at a team like New Jersey, and they invest in trades and salaries for Jake Allen and Jacob Markstrom, and they're spending a lot more in goal than the Leafs are this year and getting less. Like, those guys haven't worked out. And so whenever a team cracks the science of how to figure out goalies, that's going to put them well ahead in the NHL. And I know teams are investing vast resources in that, but just the analytics and all that is, and I think that goalie performance is highly variable year to year too. You know, you look at who the best 4 or 5 goalies in the league were, 5 years ago, and it's a completely different list than what it is today.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I get it if Stolarz needed a 4-year contract, right? Like then you're like, yeah, okay, we're out. But for a 2-year deal at this number, it's just for an inexact science. But to have a guy that's that big, that pedigree, those metrics, and you don't even need to go into the deep fancy numbers. You can just look at the normal ones and say, isn't this worth it? Like it is a little confusing to me, to be honest. And I'll tell you this too, in a league where, and granted, far greater track record, all these different things, but if I'm taking victory laps today, okay? I'm taking the victory lap on the Nyes thing, and I'm definitely taking the victory lap on the Stolarz thing. I said to so many people that I didn't want Markstrom here, that I was very adamantly against giving up assets to acquire Markstrom and then to have to extend him before you even got to look at him in the sweater, right? Because that's the insinuation of making that deal, is he's got to be here. And this is one of those things where Treliving gets credit for the goalie, but also loses a little. It's like Masai Ujiri with Kyle Lowry, where people are like, Kyle Lowry's the GOAT. Well, the GM at the time did try to trade him to the Knicks for like a first-round pick, and they kiboshed the deal. And God, what a better position the Leafs are in. Could you imagine them not having a first because they had Markstrom in net right now? Like, woo.
And he was struggling, yeah. I mean, I'm out on old goalies. Like, I don't think that,
but
any
so many
goalie
people
32
gave me crap
plus,
about that.
Yeah.
So many people gave me crap about that. They're like, Markstrom, you need Markstrom. You need Markstrom's the guy. And like, it's just, so you say. I think this is the way that you should go, is basically what I'm saying. And yeah, some teams are going to give the Mrazek contract out, but for the most part.
Well, and Mrazek's been good in Chicago. Yeah. He got a new deal there.
Yeah.
Sure, that's the thing, is that you talk about like analytics looking good on Stolarz. The analytics were really good on Mrazek when the Leafs brought him in, and then it was a complete disaster. That one, I think, was a personality mismatch with him in the market and stuff like that. But, that's the thing, is that what was the Mrazek deal? 3 years at 3.4 or something like that? And it looked like a complete turkey within like a couple of months.
Yeah. And it was even a worse 3.4, like in terms of cap percentages wise. Yeah, right. I was never a Mrazek guy. It was like the second it happened, but that was more of I couldn't stand his style, like not his pads, his aesthetic. Like, I mean, like all of it, like the way that he plays the game. I was like, this is not for me. Anyways, Stolarz, big win for this front office. Like, oh God, they're hitting it. They got some hits this season, boy. Like they're doing well. They are doing really well. All right. Yeah. Last thing. Marner. He's been playing well. And it's funny because whenever you mention it, there's a certain faction that's like, they're calling it like propaganda, where they're like the Marner propaganda. I was like, okay, this is a real thing that's happening this season. If you mention anything about Marner and positive. But yeah, has he looked different to you this year? Has he looked better? Because the expectation was that he was going to come in and he was with the Four Nations guys. He was with the top fellas up in the mountains training. Like,
apparently that was like 2 days or something. Yeah. People are talking about like he lived with Nathan McKinnon for 4 months or something. I think he went in there for 2 or 3 days and skated with them.
So it wasn't the Rocky montage from Rocky IV that he wasn't doing that up in the mountains?
Marner's been a great regular season player for like 6 years. Yeah. Like, I don't think that anything I've seen this year is like out of the norm. The good news is that he's been able to just park the contract stuff and not have it bother him and just be all business and play well. And, I'm with you. I'd like to see him without Matthews and see what he can do. I mean, he's an $11 million player. He wants more than that on the next deal. And let's drive a line, make it happen. Make Max Domi look like, an all-star next to you. Why not?
That's all I'm saying. Do that. Let's see it. Let's have a peek. Let's have a look. So when Matthews does come back, what is power play 1?
Well, Nyes has to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, the only debate is, do you go 5 forwards or do you move Tavares down to PP2 and have Riley out there? If Riley's going to shoot the puck like he did last night, then I'm fine with him being on power play 1.
I think that they're going to try 5 forwards again to start.
Yeah.
That's what they operate with, and then they see if Mitch can walk the line and be the distributor up top. And if he can do that successfully, then they'll keep running it. But that ultimately the end is with Tavares off of it. I've been the reluctant one pushing back on this, and I feel like I've been like, face-offs and asking him to sacrifice the captaincy and then power play one, and asking him to get sacrificed on the contract. It all seems like a lot, but when I'm watching the power play, there's lots of problems with it. I don't think that this is purely a Tavares thing. Like I don't. I'm certainly not trying to pin it all on him. And unfortunately, if he does get moved off the unit, that will be the narrative surrounding it, especially if it starts to go well. But when I see all the players, he feels like the guy that is doing the least.
Even last year, I don't know if I would say, definitely last season, he bobbles the puck. Mm-hmm. Like on the power play, he takes lower percentage shots than you should on the power play. He's not amazing at the net front the way that he used to be. And he turns the puck over. He turns the puck over in that kind of like, top of the circle's high slot area when they give him the puck, and it's kind of he's getting pressure, and then it seems like it goes the other way on them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I see with Tavares is he's just the hands aren't moving the way that they used to, and it's hurting them on the power play. So I agree with you.
Yep. I almost have barely anything to add. It just looks like at times he's forcing it. And I don't know if he's forcing it because he feels like they're too perimeter oriented and there's like too much time that goes by without a shot where they're just looking, searching. And then he just tries to decide upon himself that he's going to shovel it towards the net. But I would like, if you'd ask me, hey, what's the number one power play killer, like kill play that is ending like their offensive zone time before a clear or before a goalie stoppage, it's the Tavares trying to shovel it towards the net, and it ends up either on the opponent's stick or in the goalie's chest. He's got one power play goal this year. He only had 9 last season. The year before that, he had 18 power play goals. It's just, you'd kill for one of those. But I think that at some point here, not now, but fairly soon, that it is going to be his time where he moves off it, and that, Nyes is going to get that spot. He's going to lock that spot down, and it'll just be another thing that his agent can point to when they slide that big old counter offer across the table to Brad Treliving, and he trembles and goes, "No, actually, yes, we tried to get it done." Yeah, okay. Anyways,
that's what I would say with Nyes is that I don't think his camp wanted to sign anything, so I don't know if you can blame the Leafs front office because it's just like they were just like, he's playing with Matthews, like why would we sign anything right now?
I get it, but that's where you as a front office keep pushing it and go like, find us the offer. Then that makes it work because it's probably still going to be more the next year. Like I understand that argument and I get it. But I don't know how many times there's been players that have been like, we refuse to negotiate going into an RFA year. Like, when has that happened?
I don't know. Anyway, that's just the word floating out is that there wasn't a lot of interest there on that side to get ahead of it.
Hey, guess what? I'd float that out there too. That's what I'd be. That would be the number one thing I'd be wanting to float out. It's like, it was all him. He didn't want to do it. He's been honest. We couldn't do anything about it. It was outside of our control. There was absolutely nothing that we could get done. James Mirtle of The Athletic. Thanks as always for joining me, buddy.
All right. See you, JD.
See you, pal.